All right. Hey, everyone. My name's Nathan Smith, and I'm the Digital Programming Coordinator here at the Central Arkansas Library System. Thanks so much. Looks like we've got a lot of a good group here. Thanks so much for joining me for Make Your Website with WordPress Part 2. It said Part 1 on the screen earlier, but I was kind of pressed for time, so I didn't realize that until a few moments ago. But these things happen. So, okay, before we get into any of the stuff, even like the introductory stuff, I want to go ahead just right off the bat and drop a link here in the chat so that way, if you didn't have a chance to find your images, as I mentioned at the end of yesterday's session, you can you can use the example images instead. That's a good way to so you can still follow along. Okay, we have a question in the chat. Thank you. We're going to talk about making sure to ask questions whenever you need here in a moment, but you're already on top of things. So the question was, is it possible to receive a recording in Part 1? Yeah, I mean, there's I can get you a link for that here really quick. Part 1, I streamed yesterday, just like I'm doing today. So Part 1 is still available on the CAL's YouTube channel. Let me go ahead and grab you a link and I can drop that in the chat for you. And Part 2, we're streaming as well. So if so you can so you'll be able to circle back and rewatch today's class as well if you need to. Let's see. Where is the thing that I'm looking for? Okay. Got it. Okay, great. All right, here we go. Okay, the link to the Part 1 video is in the chat. All right, excellent. So, okay, let's go ahead and do the preamble really quick before we dive in, and then I do see another question that's pretty directly WordPress related. So, so we'll take a sec to touch on that in just a second. Let me go ahead and get all of the basics out of the way here. First of all, if you one thing that I mentioned at the beginning of yesterday's session, and I wanted to re-mention today, is upcoming classes, including the popular 4-part Excel course. I've got the details of that posted on the website now. So if you head to cals.org/tech-classes, then that should get you there. And you should be able to see all of the classes coming up. With the Excel, I mentioned, someone asked about it yesterday, so I mentioned the specific timing. The times are still the same, but I decided, since it was late going up on the website, that I would go ahead and push it back a little bit. So the Excel course is going to happen starting on Monday. I believe it's the 9th. So the second Monday of next month. That'll be Part 1. The following week on Monday, Part 2. The following Part 3. And the following week, the final Part 4. So those will be on Mondays, 10 a.m. to 11:30. So hopefully you'll be able to join me for that. If that sounds interesting to you, Excel is just super duper useful. So if that sounds at all interesting to you, or if you've always been curious about Excel, or if you're trying to find a job, and they are, and some employers are looking for Excel skills, it's definitely worth checking out. And honestly, I love teaching that class. It's super fun. So hopefully you can join me for that as well, and you'll get a lot out of it too. And again, ask questions when you have them. So if you're here in Zoom and you're on a computer, click the chat speech bubble at the bottom of your Zoom window and type your questions on the right. If you are in the Zoom mobile app, tap the middle of the screen and then look for more in the corner, tap on that, tap chat, and that should give you the chat box. If you are watching on YouTube, then you'll want to use the live chat. It'll be off to the right of the video if you're on a desktop computer. And if you're on a mobile device, it'll be down below the video, and you might have to tap something to see it, but there should be something that says live chat. And then if you're joining me on Facebook, viewing the live stream there, you'll just want to put your questions in the comments, just like you would comment on any other post on Facebook. And I'll be able to see those and respond to them. And as always, let me know if there are technical problems, because I want to make sure those get tackled as quickly as possible so we make the most of our time. Okay, let's dive in. So we did get a question right off the bat here. Darcy says, my website's running, is WordPress running X theme? It was created by someone else. Can I still use the basic WordPress features? Yeah, you should be able to. Most of the stuff we're going to talk about is not terribly different, depending on, even with additional sort of plugins and things like that. So it should probably be fine. It will, depending on what plugins are installed there, things might be in slightly different places, or plugins might take over certain portions of functionality that are normally done by just the basic WordPress. So you may have to tread a little carefully and read a little carefully to do it, but yeah, you should be okay. I mean, any WordPress is going to work pretty similarly most of the time. So yeah, you should be good. And I do. Sometimes I also offer what I call open lab sessions, which are when we're doing in-person classes. It's a drop-in session where you can come here to the classroom, and well, I'm not in the classroom right now, but you can come to the classroom here at the main library and sort of drop in with your questions, or asking for help troubleshooting and things like that. And so you've got, but I do those virtually sometimes as well, where basically I create a little 30-minute Zoom meeting that's kind of a one-on-one session. So if you find you have difficulty after that, I'm not 100% sure when the next one of those is, to be perfectly honest. The virtual version of Open Lab hasn't been super popular, so I'm only doing it every so often. But if you keep an eye on the website, then I may have one of those coming up before too long. And so if you run into problems, I could probably give you a little extra help there. So yeah, but I think the basic answer is yeah. All right, let's see. Here we go. Let's go ahead and start up the screen sharing and dive in here. Oh, excuse me. Okay, nope. Well, hang on just a sec. Okay, there we go. That's better. Okay, we got it. So what I've got, so now I'm here in kind of, signed back into the back end of my site. I actually just went to WordPress.com, and because I was signed in yesterday, it just took me on through to where I needed to be. But I do want to mention something just briefly. So if you need to access the back end of your website on another computer where you're not logged in, or if your computer gets logged out of WordPress and you need to get back in, or if you've got like or if you get a new computer or whatever, there are a ton of different possibilities here. Basically, if you ever need to log into the back end of your website, the way that you do this is thankfully pretty easy. Pretty much any WordPress site, what you'll do is go to the address. So you'll go to the address of the site. So in my case, it's Cal's DL July 21.wordpress.com. So you'll type in the address of your site. You'll add a slash at the end, and then you'll go WP-admin. When you do, it's going to take you to what's called the dashboard here. Basically, it looks like thankfully WordPress.com has actually moved to a little bit more of a setup like a traditional WordPress installation. They used to have this separate thing called like the My Site menu that was a completely different navigation setup from regular WordPress. And so that's strange that they did that, but it's true. And so you will, thankfully, it looks like they've gotten rid of it. So this doesn't look actually terribly different from what you see over here, this My Home or whatever. And certainly the navigation menu is the same, which is the main thing. But essentially regardless of the version of WordPress you're running, regardless of where WordPress is installed, where your site is hosted and stuff, going to the address of your site /WP-admin is pretty much always going to get you to the back end. So if you're signed out, it'll prompt you, it'll come up with kind of your basic login page, and you'll need to sign in with your username and your password, or your email address and your password. Excuse me. But once you do, you'll come up with this dashboard here. Okay, cool. So that's just a little aside, but obviously it's super duper important to know how to get to the back end of your site if you want to continue to manage your site. So let's go ahead and dive into the main stuff that we're going to be doing today. So what we're mostly going to be doing is we're going to be working on posting things and talking about the editor. The editor obviously is super important in WordPress and in, well, any content management system, because that's where you go to put your stuff that's going to be on the website. Oh my goodness, y'all. Woo. Sleepy today. That's where you go to put your stuff that you want your visitors to be able to see. So we talked about this at the end of yesterday's session, but I just want to go ahead and circle back on it really quick and just refresh your memory. So there are basically two main types of, I hate to use the word pages, but pages on your WordPress website. One of those is just called pages, or sometimes people will say static pages to differentiate it from just, the general concept of a web page. And a static page is going to be content that you might consider timeless. So basically, content that is content that you probably won't be updating that often. Maybe you'll go in there and give it a tweak every 6 months or every year or once a quarter or something like that. But generally speaking, the content of the front page of your website or different things like that, it's probably not going to change terribly often. An about page or a page reflecting the hours of your store or things like that. Most of that stuff is going to stay is going to stay generally the same. And so those are good things to put on your static pages or just pages. On the other side of things is blog posts, and blog posts are going to host, rather than timeless content, timely content. So, for example, if you are doing if you decided to post a review of a new movie that you just saw, or an old movie that you just saw, or to talk about goings on around the city or different things like that, whatever the case may be, those types of things are good content for blogs, or things that your audience may appreciate, but not necessarily need quick access to. For example, like, I saw the website for a cleaning company one time that where they on their blog they would do posts with tips to keep your house clean, or easy shortcuts for cleaning this, that, or the other, that sort of thing. So that kind of stuff is not necessarily directly related to the mission of the business in a way, which is to be paid to clean your house, but at the same time, it's really useful related content. It helps keep the audience more engaged and draw new potential customers to the site, things like that. So a lot of times in running a website, or even in posting things like social media content and stuff like that, sometimes we can get really laser focused on marketing, basically, like all messages, and kind of make all of our messages marketing messages, but people don't really like that. And so, if it's, and they're suspicious of it a lot of times. So if you want, adding in some other things that are of value to your audience can kind of make that a little more like, can make them more receptive to your marketing messages, if that's what you're doing with your website. So in any case, that's a little aside there. But whenever you're working on, whenever there's some content that you want to post on your site, you do want to kind of think about that sort of dichotomy of timely content and timeless content, and try to think to yourself before you get too involved in creating a post, or creating a page, like, is this content timely or timeless? Would it be better to have as a blog post, or as a static page that's easier for my audience to find over the long term? Okay, so let's go ahead and we're going to create both. We're going to make a page, and we're going to make a post today. So let's start with our page. I'm going to move my mouse over pages here, and when I do, it gives me a little pop-out menu. I have all pages and add new. Let's go ahead and click all pages just so we can see this list really quick. And there are 4 altogether, actually. So there's an about page here. Oh, you know what? I'm in the wrong spot. I got to go up here and switch sites. There we go. Okay, cool. All right, so back over here, pages, all pages. Okay, there are 2. I expected to see 2 from looking at the website yesterday, and so that makes a lot more sense. All right, so we got 2 pages. We got one called blog and one called home. So the blog page is really just the that's the page with the list of blog posts from my site. So if people go to the blog page, they'll basically just see, okay, here's the latest post, here's the second to latest post, here's the third latest post. If they go to the home page here, then we looked at the home page yesterday, and that's obviously where they'll land when they first type in the address of my site. I want to come up here and add a new page. I'm going to click add new page. And when I do, it gives me this situation right here. So it says, add a page, pick a predefined layout, or start with a blank page. So they have a bunch of different layouts or templates that that you could potentially use as kind of a starting point, so that you're not completely, so that you're not completely starting from scratch. And a lot of times these come with your these will come with your theme. So depending on what theme you're using, you may find different things here. And there are a bunch of other ones over here that I could potentially pick. But instead of doing that, I'm going to start with a blank page, because I want you to kind of see, how we build this up, and we'll also play around with we'll look briefly at one of these templates as well, just to kind of get a even better feel for how all of this works. So I'm going to click blank page over here, and that's going to start me out here. Now, depending on what theme your website has, your editor here may look slightly different. Mine has add title, and then, it should have this, but mine is kind of a light gray on top of this blue here. Your theme may look different. You may have white with dark text, or any number of things, just depending on the color schemes and the fonts included and stuff like that. So let's go ahead and get started. So up here where it says add title, I'm going to go ahead and click there. I'll get a little blinking cursor right there, and I'm going to type about as the name of my page there. And then down below where it says start writing, or type / choose a block. If I click here and I start typing something, what it's going to do is, let me show you. Okay, great. I wrote a little paragraph there. And when I move my mouse over it, you'll notice what shows up here. First of all, we have the little paragraph symbol here. So it's kind of looks like a backwards P with these two lines. And that's just sort of a symbol that means paragraph. If you've ever turned on the formatting symbols in Word, you've probably seen this before. But by just typing here, we've created what's called a paragraph block. WordPress in the modern editor from the last probably 2 to 3 years, something like that. The editor that we use in modern versions of WordPress is called Gutenberg, and basically, it allows you a lot of flexibility by working in this kind of block system, very similar to a lot of other things. If you've ever used like MailChimp or Constant Contact, things like that. This sort of block system, what it allows you to do is take your stuff and basically sort of be able to move it around as you see fit, and be able to have a really flexible layout so that your site works on a variety of different types of devices. Right now I have like a big widescreen monitor, and so if I visited your site, like I would see a really wide version of it. If I visited your site on my phone, then I'd be looking at a very narrow version where we have a lot of where we have more vertical space than we do horizontal. And so people are going to be visiting your website from all sorts of devices. So you need to, it needs to work on a lot of different types of devices. And there are ways to check for that that we'll talk about a little later. But that's one of the reasons that this Gutenberg editor is important versus the old school WordPress editor, which which was really a text box and then a lot of settings around it. So, so we've got this little, when I move my mouse over these controls here, you'll notice I've got a little border around the paragraph here. So that tells me where the paragraph block, where the edges of this paragraph block are. If I come over here a little bit, I've got a button to change the text alignment. If I click on that, then it gives me a little pop-out menu, and I can align, I can center my text, or I can align it along the right-hand margin, whichever works best for this situation. So maybe I'll center it this time. I've also got some basic text formatting controls, which we're not going to spend like a ton of time on. I can select some text, and I can use, I can click the little B here to do bold. Click it again to turn it off. I can also italicize it with this I button here. There's a link, which we'll talk about in just a sec. And then there are a bunch of other formatting options here for my text. So inline code and inline image, these are for, so inline code would be basically creating text that's really easy to copy and paste for people who are working on coding projects. Inline image, this is going to be like, let's say you were giving instructions for how to do something on a computer. If one of your steps of your instructions says like, click the OK button, you could write click the and then quotation marks OK button to proceed or whatever. Or you could actually insert a picture in with the text, so you could have a little image of the OK button. And it would just be in the flow of the sentence there. So the picture of the OK button would be treated like a character in your text, like a letter or a number or a symbol. So that's what an inline image is, basically an image that's treated as part of the text rather than separate from it. Justified text, if you use justified text, it looks kind of the same as the text being aligned to the left, except that justified text also aligns the text along the right-hand margin, except for the last line of each paragraph. And primarily what that does is it gives a kind of a cleaner look on the edges. So that's kind of nice and can make things look a little more professional in certain circumstances. This keyboard input, that's a whole thing. There's strike through to cross something out, subscript and superscript. You can change the color of your text here. There's underline and there's uppercase. So that'd be like your small caps. Let's go ahead and talk about creating a link though. Let's say I want to turn this phrase round things out into a link to the library's website. What I'm going to do is select the text. I'll click the little chain link here, and then it says search or type URL. So the reason it says search is if you're linking to another piece of content on your website, then you can identify that page or that post or whatever directly just by searching for the name of it. And that could be really handy and that can be really handy if you're like, oh, I should probably link to the rules of the contest that I'm explaining here or whatever. Then you can just search for it if it's something that's already on your website. If you're linking to an outside page, of course, then you'll need to use an actual URL. So I'll go http://cals.org and add an extra slash just for good measure. I can press enter or click down here to make that the address. And I also have a slider right here that I can, a little switch that I can turn on and off, open a new tab. Obviously, if you turn this on, then if somebody clicks the link, it's automatically going to open a new tab in their web browser, which is handy since you're sending them out of your website. It might be a good idea. That way they can get back to the page they were on your website easily. But it just kind of depends on what you're working on there. It might also be good for things like citations. If you're citing some other information online, obviously you want to link to that information to show people like, you know, to give people a good source for the information that that you're providing them, and to credit whoever, you know, whoever made that public initially. But if you're writing some, you know, some sort of detailed information, you may have a bunch of links in the article that you're writing, and so including and so allowing you to open it in a new tab means they can keep reading the article essentially while you're but they can also open that tab so that they can see, you know, your sources. I'll go ahead and open a new tab on this. I can click here, or I could press enter to lock that in. Doesn't matter. Either way, it's a link and we're good to go. Okay, when I click this ... it gives me a bunch of extra settings or extra options here. We'll come back to all this in a second, but I did want to just, you know, finish this little toolbar off by pointing out that that's also a button and it does something. Okay, if I want another paragraph, I can press enter and there we go. Now I've got a second paragraph block. Now, just to be clear, your paragraph block is going to have, your paragraph block should have a, how to put it. So with the paragraph blocks, or each actual paragraph of your text should be in a separate paragraph block. That way you can reorder them if you need to. And that way it renders correctly on any device that's designed to work well with HTML. Otherwise, essentially the code behind the scenes is going to be a little bit, you know, even if you know that you're not going to change the order of your paragraphs or anything, some of the code that's behind the scenes is going to be a little off if each paragraph doesn't have its own paragraph block. Now, of course, it's super easy to create a paragraph block. Literally, all you need to do is start a paragraph block, or is when you're in a paragraph block, press enter, and it will create a new one. So press enter and start typing. So it's super duper easy. Over here on this side, we have some additional settings for our paragraph block. So under typography, we can change the font size to one of these settings: default, small, normal, large, huge, or custom. And then we can fill in a custom number, excuse me, if you want like 12-point font or whatever. I highly recommend not using this unless there's a very good specific reason for that. And the reason I say that is if you change these settings, so like I said, I've got a big old, you know, very wide, high resolution monitor in front of me. If somebody, if I were to browse to a website and the website specifically designates that it wants a certain font size, then, you know, if it's a small font size, it might have looked fine on the screen of their laptop, but it's probably not going to look so good on a large, high resolution monitor, particularly when you get up to 4K. You know, newer, fancier, more expensive 4K monitors are going to show you are going to render text that's in a specific size like that a lot smaller. On your phone screen, on the other hand, if you choose a somewhat larger size that looks like medium on your computer screen, it might look enormous on a phone screen. So rather than putting in a specific like pixel size for your fonts, instead try to stick with these like small, normal, large, and huge, and your website will scale better to different screen sizes. You also have a line height option down here that you can tweak if you want to, so that you can essentially change how much space is in between each line of text, or each each pair of lines of text, I guess I should say. Under this color heading, you can change the color of the text, but it's gonna specifically show you colors that are associated with your website's theme, and that can be really useful. You can choose a custom color, but if you want it to fit in with the rest of your website and look, and you know, there are ways to make things stand out on your website without making them stick out like a sore thumb, you might say, and using a color that's outside of the color scheme of your theme, unless you carefully consider what color that is, might make things kind of stick out like a sore thumb. And so, stick with these built-in colors if you can, but if you need to choose a custom color, then you can. This is the text background color, so this is going to be behind the text, obviously. Like so, put in a little color text box. So that might be a way to make it sort of a certain paragraph stand out, that sort of thing. Your text settings, you can do a drop cap, which is like a large capital for to start the paragraph off. And the text kind of flows around this a little bit, so it looks kind of like a book. That's cool. And then under advanced here, you can do some extra HTML and CSS stuff. Since this is not an HTML or CSS class, we're not going to really dig into that. Okay, so we've got two paragraphs here, each in their own paragraph block. Let's go ahead and add another block here. I'm going to press enter again. Then it says type / to choose a block. This time I am going to do that. I'm going to hit the / key on my keyboard, or I can hit this plus sign over here. Either way works. When I hit the / key, what's going to happen is it's going to give me some common blocks that I could use: the image block, the heading block, the gallery, list, quote, short code, archives, audio, and buttons. So let's go ahead and choose a heading block this time. I'm going to click heading, and okay, I'm just going to say section 1 there. And we have a bunch of additional options here to deal with this. So the heading block is another way of putting text on our page. But this time, we've got slightly different options here. So for one thing, we do still have this change alignment. If I click on that, excuse me, that's not the right one. So this change alignment right here is either going to make the block wide width, in other words, most of the width of the page, or full width, all of the width of the page. So if I choose full width, then it's going to be over here, and essentially wherever the leftmost edge of the person's screen is, this is going to hug that edge, unless I come over here and change my text alignment. So I could align it, I could center it, or I could go align it to the right. Again, if I align it to the right, it's going to be at the absolute extreme of my visitor's browser window. But if I go back to wide width, then it's still plenty wide, but it's not going to sit exactly on the edge, which is usually not the best option. We have a lot of our text formatting options like we did in the paragraph block. And then this H2 right here, when I click on that, so this does go into a little bit of HTML, but I do want you to know about this a little bit. So H1 here is, that's going to be a primary heading. In most cases, that's going to be like the title of the page. The title of the page typically is formatted as H1. So that's the largest heading. And then if you have subsections inside of your document, not just a title or whatever, then H2 is what you would use for that. H3 is for sort of subsections, H4 is for sections inside of those. H5 is for sections inside of those. And H6 is for sections inside of those. So you can go way deep on the headings. The point of this is you do want to be a little bit consistent about this. Heading, you shouldn't use a heading block for just text that you want to emphasize. It actually is designed to specifically break down the sections of your page so that people know where they are on the page and they can read, and they can read the information that you're trying to communicate effectively. If you just use the headers willy-nilly, search engines like Google aren't going to be able to make much sense of the structure of your page either. And that's not good for your search rankings. So, so use this in a consistent way. If it's, what I usually do is if it's a title, it's H1. If it's a section underneath that, it's H2 and so forth. And then if I had a subsection underneath that, that'd be an H3. So use that, use that wisely. When I press enter again, I could type slash to choose a block, or I could hit plus over here. I'm going to hit plus this time. And when I hit plus, it's going to give me these few kind of popular or common options for blocks. I can also click browse all though. When I do that, it's going to give me a bunch of different possible blocks that I could add to my page, way more than we could possibly talk about in this class. And you also have in this patterns area kind of those templates like we were talking about earlier. But with blocks, you have a bunch of different possibilities here. Like I said, I'm not going to go into all of them because we just don't have the time, but there's things like you can insert a table, you can add a pull quote, you can paste in something that's already formatted in HTML. You can use the classic WordPress editor, which I do not recommend if you have access to the Gutenberg one. You can create a list, like a bulleted list or a numbered list. You can create a sort of a different type of quote that stands out, and a whole bunch of other stuff. Down here under media, you can insert a bunch of useful things, including images, audio, and just a whole lot here. I actually am gonna create a gallery block. So I'm going to click on gallery, and it drops the gallery block right here. Now it says drag images, upload new ones, or select files from your library. So whenever you upload any sort of media to your website, once you do that, it's stored in your website's media library. And the media, and that's really useful because if you have stuff that's stored, because when you have stuff that's stored in the media library, it will basically, or you can reuse it as much as you want without having to re-upload it or, go and hunt it down and I know it was on my computer. That's a real hassle. So instead of that, you upload a piece of media one time, images, videos, audio, even like documents, different files like a PDF file, things like that. Any of that stuff, it's going to be in your media gallery. And so you can quickly insert that anywhere you need to. For now, though, we don't really have much in our media gallery, so I'm going to click upload. So I would, if I had it in my media library, I would click select images here and it would take me to the library, which we'll talk about in a sec. For now, though, I'm going to click upload, and that is going to, well, it should. There we go. And now it gives me the little file browser here. On my desktop, I have the, actually this, there we go. I've got my example site assets folder there, and I've got some images in here. I'm not going to upload all of these because honestly, there's a bunch, but I'll choose some. So I'm going to click on one. If I want more than one image, by the way, at the same time, which I do since I'm creating a gallery, I'm going to use the keyboard to make that quicker. So if I click on one, I can hold down the Control key, CTRL, at the bottom corner of my keyboard while clicking on other ones. I'm on Windows. If you're on a Mac, you'll hold the Command key instead of the Control key, I believe. And that should do the same thing for you, basically. Of course, you can also, if the images are all together that you want, you can drag a box around them like this on either Windows or a Mac. And hey, if you're on a touchscreen Windows computer, then you can tap and hold on an image, and it should give you a little checkbox. And you just tap the other images that you want, and it'll check them off as well. There we go. Okay, I've got 5 images there. I'm going to click open. And they're uploading now. Beautiful. All right, so we've got our image gallery here. And if I click on one of these images, I can come down here and add a caption if I want to. I don't have to do that. And depending on your theme, it might kind of look bad, but in some themes, it might not. You can replace the image by using this little pencil icon. Excuse me. You can remove it by hitting the X, and you can change the order. So if I want this one up here, then I'll hit the left arrow once, and that should shift them around. I can change the alignment, so whether it sits along the left-hand margin, the right-hand margin, the center, or whether it's possibly wide width, nice, or full width. A little too much. So wide width seems good. Now let's see. Okay, that's looking pretty good. While I've got this block selected, I can also come over here, and again, there are block settings here. So we had the settings for the paragraph block over here before. If I'm working in this gallery block, then I can come over here on the right, and I can change the settings for it. So I have columns. I can change the number of columns. So if I choose 2, then I get 4 small images and a big one there. If I go with 4, and so on and so forth. So just depending on how you want that to be set up. If you turn off this crop images, then it'll show the images at their correct shape. Otherwise, it'll crop them down to fit so that everything kind of falls into the gallery rather than being so that everything shows up, so that everything sort of aligns with the borders of the gallery. We've got this link to, if you choose none, that's usually the best option. If the visitor clicks on that, then it's going to pop up and show them like a little, by default, it's going to pop up and show them like a little shadow box view where they can see a large version of the image, and then they'll see the rest of your page dimly behind it in the background. But there's also link to media file is just going to take them directly to the image itself. So if they click on it, then basically it'll either open a new tab, which is just the picture, or it will show them or take them to just the picture in their web browser, or prompt them to download the file. If you choose attachment page, what's going to happen is WordPress, for all of your media files, WordPress creates this thing called an attachment page. For the life of me, I don't know. I don't really think the attachment pages are terribly useful. They seem like kind of an artifact of something, and to be honest, I don't know what. But you should be able to, you know, if you're kind of like hosting a media gallery of some sort, things like that, then the attachment page could be useful because you can put essentially extra information about the picture or whatever on that attachment page. You can choose what size the images are going to be in the gallery layout. And then there's your HTML and CSS again. If I click out of here, then you can see kind of how the gallery turned out. Looks pretty good. Okay, I'm going to come down and I'm going to click the little plus sign again over here on the right. And I'll click Browse All one more time. And let's go ahead and let's see. Okay, cool. Yeah, someone's headed out because they have a meeting at 2. Totally understandable. No worries. Yeah, check out on the YouTube channel. You can watch the end of today's class, so that way you're fully caught up. And then I'll see you tomorrow. Thanks for coming. Okay, cool. So let's see. We've got our so we've got some other stuff we can do. For example, we can insert, let's go with the columns first. I'm going to drop in a columns block here. So select a variation to start with. So I can either do one column, which seems a little useless, but okay. I could do half and half. I can do a larger column on one side than the other. I can do 3 columns equal, or I can do 3 columns with the big one in the middle. So I'll go ahead and let's do 3 columns for now. We'll do this 33, 33, 33. Okay, so what that's going to do is create a block that's kind of a container for other blocks. And again, I have some settings over here. I can change the padding inside the blocks, you know, how much they're separated from each other. And I could actually unlink that so that I can change each side separately. I can change the width of the columns to specific pixel width if I want to, though again, that's usually not a great idea. And I can change the colors of the columns as well. So you know, I could change the layout, and I can change the vertical alignment of the columns, but we're probably not going to see much difference there until I actually add some blocks into these columns. So I'm going to put a paragraph block over here. And I'll hit the plus over here and throw in an image. And this time, because I've already uploaded some pictures, I'm going to click Select Image. And I can choose from either the media library, so the images I've already uploaded, Google Photos. I can connect my Google Photos account and access photos there directly, so I don't even have to upload them if I don't want to. And then free photos from Pexels, one of the 3 royalty-free photo services that I talked about yesterday. So I'll click Media Library, and that brings up the Media Library here. So now I have these images and also a couple of things that were already on the website at the time. I'll go ahead and choose this one with the, let's do the dog. So when I click on that, I do have the option, if I click up here, I can click Edit, and I can change some of the details about it. I can change the title of the image. I can do the caption. I can add alt text. Now, if your images on your website contain information that's important to understanding what your website is communicating, now it's important, or just to be clear, what I'm talking about is something reasonably specific. If you're like, well, images are, the images that I'm using are important to set a tone or things like that. That's fine. That's a very good way to use an image, but that's not necessarily what I'm talking about here. When I'm talking about, the alt text is primarily designed for people who can't see the images that are on your website. So if the image is important to understanding the content of your website, understanding the things that you are trying to communicate, the information that you are trying to put across, then you'll want to describe the image here in alt text. So for example, with this particular image, I might say something like a dog reaching out of a laptop screen. So just a little short description, not anything fancy. You don't have to get too purple with the prose there, and you don't have to describe in detail. In fact, I recommend that you don't, because whoever, if someone's using assistive screen reading software and they want to know what's in the image, if you've written a whole paragraph of description, they're going to have to sit there and listen to the reader software read that whole paragraph of text. So be concise, and then you can add a bigger description or a caption there. Now, the difference between a description and a caption, to be honest with you, I'm not 100% clear, except that they sit in different places. They'll show up in different places depending on your theme. The caption is more likely to show up than the description is. The description, I think, is supposed to be a little more detailed, and so you can get really in depth if you want to. If you're hosting like historical photos on your site, you can say like, this photo is from 1935 when such and such a thing happened. So and so is in the White House and blah 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 blah. Here under the caption, you might say something like, a dance hall from 1935 or whatever. So normally in this situation, again, unless it's relevant to the actual message that I'm putting across, I might not add this alt text, but it's important to add alt text whenever you're trying to communicate something specific with an image. I'll hit the plus sign here, and let's go ahead and throw in a list, and we'll make the list breakfast. I'll hit enter, and it's going to create a little bullet point for me in my list without me having to do anything else. Lunch, dinner. And if I prefer, if I move my mouse over this, I could do things like, say, for instance, change it from a bulleted list to a numbered list. I can change the indentation settings, and I can change, I could switch types of block, but we don't need that. Okay, cool. So here we go. Now we've got our columns, we've got our blocks inside of the columns. One of the ways that this block system is cool is that you can use it to really quickly shuffle your content around. Someone says they'd like to see how the captions look. Let me go ahead and, in this case, at least with the theme that I'm using, the captions would show up, call your dog, like that. It'll look basically exactly like that on the final page. That's one of the cool things about this editor, is it shows you in pretty good detail how things are going to look before you publish. So let's say that I want this paragraph that says this is also a paragraph, it's shorter. Let's say that I want that paragraph to actually be a part of section 1 here. If I want that, then it's actually super easy to move this header to the appropriate place. What I'm going to do is move my mouse over these 6 dots here. And you'll notice it pops up and says drag right underneath it. I'm going to hold down on my mouse button. And I'm going to move up. You'll notice I get this little line with the plus sign when I let go. Whoops. Come on now. There we go. Okay, now it's working with me. That was weird. I can use this and I get the little blue line wherever I'm possibly inserting the header. When I let go, then it's reordered. I can also use these arrow buttons to move things up and down. So I can move this block up a little bit or down or whatever I want it to be. I could also even take a block from inside of these columns and drag it around, say drop it up here. There we go. And that gives me a nice little, and so that gives me a ton of flexibility. Since I have this columns block here, I can, then I have essentially a 3-column layout for this section of my page, and I can just drop any old blocks inside there. In fact, I'll go ahead and put this paragraph over here. And there we go. I think that'll do it. Nope. Does not like me here. So yeah, someone's asking, yes, this is the Gutenberg editor. This is, most modern versions of WordPress come with this at this point because it's been around for a few years. The older versions of the WordPress editor, I'll show you just briefly what they look like. Okay, good. The older version looks something like this. This is the event page from the website for this from the CAL's website for this very class. So it's got a little text editor in here. You can switch to the visual one, which basically gives you kind of a word processor, Microsoft Word style editing situation here. Or you can do plain text and you can see all the HTML and so forth. And then you set your settings down here. Now, a lot of these are associated with plugins that we are using for events and so forth, but you'll have things like the comments, trackbacks and pingbacks, and the excerpt and so on, which we'll talk about in a sec. And then the featured image, we'll get to all that in just a moment. But yeah, that's what the regular editor looks like. Okay, so we've done a lot of good stuff here. Someone asked, does it take an upgrade to get the Gutenberg, to move to the Gutenberg editor from the regular one? Maybe. It just depends on how your website's set up. You said someone else set the website up for you, so that that might be, depending on how they configured it, there could be a couple of different answers if that's not the editor that you have. But any version of WordPress from WordPress 5 on up should be compatible with this. The main thing, since you said, I forget what you said, it was X theme. Yeah. That I'm guessing is a plugin, and you might want to check to make sure that plugin is compatible. The Gutenberg editor, most plugins at this point, if they're regularly updated, they should be compatible, because this editor, like I said, has been around for 2 or 3 years at least. And so, but you might have to make some tweaks in settings, or you might have to, you might have to update your WordPress if it's older than WordPress. If it's WordPress version 4 point something or lower. Yeah, good question. So we've got our page mostly in place. Let's look at some of the settings that we might need to at least look at before we publish our actual page itself. Okay, so over here on the side, when we're working inside of blocks, we've got a block tab up here at the top. But I can also click the page tab up here to switch over to my page settings. And to change those page settings, any changes that we make in this page settings area are going to affect, well, the whole page. So let's look through these really quick. So visibility public. What that is once your page is published, which this one is not at this point, if we hit save draft up here at the top, then we can save a copy of this page without it going live to our visitors. And so if we want somebody else to look at it, things like that, we might, or we want to kind of sleep on it and come back, or we just need to step away and work on it later on, then that's definitely a good thing to do. I'll go ahead and save the draft for the moment. So visibility public. Once the page gets published, if the visibility is set to public, then anybody who visits the website, once the website is launched, can see it. You also have the option for private. So that would be a page that, as it says, is only visible to site administrators and editors. So in other words, people who can log into the back end of your site can see this page. No one else can. And that can be useful for things like, say, if you have an internal style guide, or there are reference pages that you want staff to be able to get to, things like that. That's a good way to use a private page. So they'll log into the back end of the website, and then they'll be able to see that. And then password protected. As it says, protected with the password you choose. Only those with the password can view this post. That is exactly what it sounds like. It's a page where if you go to the address of the page, it'll say, hey, what's the password? And if you type in the password, then you get to the content of the page. And if you don't, then you can't see the content of the page. Okay, under publish, there's immediately, or if you click on that, then you can set a date and time. You can also set a date and time that are in the past, so that you're, in most situations, your page will look like it was published earlier. Now, of course, your page can't travel back in time to be available to visitors that would see it, but or that would have seen it. But for example, this is particularly useful for blog posts. If you want your blog posts to appear in a specific order, then you can date it retroactively. But you can also do the other thing. You can set a date and time, and until that date and time roll around, the page won't appear to your visitors. But once that date and time do roll around, then they'll start to see the page published on your site. So that's really useful if you have particular content that you want to go live at a particular time. Pending review, if you check this box, then basically it'll publish but not publish. The page will be like, essentially the page will be flagged so that, if you're working with an editor or a co-site manager or something like that, they can come along and check your work. And that's really useful sometimes. Move to trash. Obviously, if you've created this page, but you've decided, I'm not going to publish this, you can move it to the trash. Down here where it says for revisions, you can take a look and see what changes you've made to your to the page. It just shows it in shows the actual HTML. So you can kind of see like what all you've done. And if you click load over here, then basically you can get to an old version of the page from before you made whatever disastrous edits you want to revert. We've all been there. Okay, when I click permalink, what's going to happen is it's going to give me the URL slug, which, as it says, is the last part of the URL. So on my website, if I leave this as about and I publish the page, then this is going to be the address of the page, calsdl21.wordpress.com/about. If somebody goes to that, goes directly to that address, then they'll get to this about page. But I could change it if I wanted to like about-us or things like that. All of that, any of that would work perfectly fine. but the main idea with this that to point, or the main thing to point out is by default, WordPress will create a slug based on the title that you give the page, but it will, you don't have to stick with that. You can change it over here. Okay, featured image. This is pretty important. So when I click set featured image, what it's going to do again is give me the option of the media library, Google Photos, or free photos from Pexels. I'll click media library again, and I'll select, oh, I don't know, this one. I'll click insert. And that's been set as my featured image. The featured image is important because if you think about like, if you think about something like, say, a social media post, for example. Let's see. Let me pull up that. Okay, cool. So if you think about something like that, then you've got, let me pull that up. Okay, there we go. All right, so this is from Facebook's site. If you look at this, I'm going to zoom in a smidge, and whoop, there we go. Okay, so if you look at this, nope, that's not the right thing. Anyway, you're all familiar with social media. You know what's up. So if you post like a news, say a news article or something like that on your social media, then basically you'll see like there are some things that the person who posted it is responsible for, or things that they are in control of. And as the user, or as the person who owns the website or is running the website, there are things that you are, there are things that you can actually control. So here we go. All right, this is a good example. Okay, so taking a look at this news article here, what we've got is sort of a this is who posted the article, when they posted it, and their profile picture. This text is within the control of whoever posted the article. So they could say, check out this cool article, or this is terrible, or whatever. And then down here, all of this stuff inside this box, as the person who's running the website, you are in control of this. So right here where it says officials release transcript, blah, blah, blah. So this is going to be the title of the page. So for our page, it's going to be about right here. And this up here is going to be the featured image. So whatever you set as the featured image over here, which apparently is not working so well for some weird reason. Whatever you set as the featured image here, that is going to show up to, if someone or even you share your, your content, like this particular page on social media, this is the image that they're going to see. And you definitely want an image there, because if you share a link and it doesn't have a picture, then people are not as likely to click on it. So make sure you set a featured image for your page. Down here, it says write in excerpt. This is another thing that's over here. So by default, if I were to share this to social media as it is, then it would say here about, and then it would say underneath where it says, or with this in the smaller text, it would say, this is a basic paragraph. It's the beginning of my about page. Here's another sentence, blah, 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 blah. And if it's too long, if that's too long, then what's going to happen is you'll get like a ... like this, where it gets cut off. So what you can do instead is where it says write in excerpt here, you can write something a little punchier. or something a little more descriptive than whatever just happens to be the first bit of text on your page. So you could say something like, you know, a gallery of images of nature and technology. Okay, cool. So that's, I mean, it's not fantastic, but it's a little punchier than what, than this paragraph of filler that I wrote here. And so if you write something that's real, that has a good hook to it, then you have another chance here of pulling in potential visitors to your site. Under discussion, allow comments. If you're doing a static page like we are now, I recommend not doing that because you don't want people to come in and put potentially nasty comments on kind of your main pages that people would be browsing through. So, I mean, with blog posts, it's one thing because blog posts eventually get pushed down and they're not quite as prominent. But if you allow comments on your static pages, in my opinion, you're asking for trouble. So unless, I mean, your mileage may vary, but I wouldn't do it. Under parent page here. So this is going to be, basically you can, this is for a couple of things. One of those, so right now you'll notice that there's, so I've got CalSTL July 21.wordpress.com/about. If I set a particular page as the parent page, then I'll get, let's say that the parent page was, you know, information or something. If I set information as the parent page, then the address of this page is going to be calcljuly21.wordpress.com/information/about. So it works in the address, and in the navigation menu, it also matters there because if you know, unless you go in and tweak your navigation menu, by default, what's going to happen is when you move your mouse over information in the navigation menu, then there's going to be a little menu that pops up that has about as one of the options in it. But if about is the parent page and information is the child page, then when I move my mouse over about in the menu, then information is going to pop up in the drop down. So you can tweak this if you want, and you can also change the order it will show in your navigation menu. Okay, so I'm happy with the settings that I've got. What I'm going to do is, if I want, I could click preview up here, and that's going to show me like a basic version of the page. One thing that's really useful here is in this little preview window, and you may have seen this yesterday a couple of times as well, I've got this drop-down box that says desktop. If I click on that, I can also click tablet and see if somebody looks at it on their iPad or something like that, how is the site going to look then? It'll look more like that. And then I can go to phone. On a phone, it'll look more like this. So it's not perfect, and depending on what hardware and what software people are using, it might look slightly different from this, you know, in the end. But generally speaking, it's gonna behave pretty much like this. And so, so this is a really handy way to make sure that your page is reading at all of the sizes that you want it to read at. I'm going to click close, and I'm going to click publish up here. By default, WordPress will give you these pre-published checks, and it will double check to make sure you do want this to be a public page and not a private or password protected one. You do want it to go live immediately and not to set a specific date for it to go live. And then there's this social previews. They're trying to sell you a paid plan here. If you uncheck this box that says always show pre-published checks, then in the future, when you click publish, it's just going to publish the page right away, which frankly would be my preference. But you know, you may find this catches you sometimes, particularly if you're changing the visibility or the publish date a lot on your stuff. I'll click publish. And now it says it's live. So there's a link to it. There's the page address, so I can copy the link, or I can click view page to actually browse there. And there it is. That's the final version of this page. So let's go ahead and quickly create a blog post. We're not going to spend a ton of time on that because most of what you do there is extremely similar to what we just did here, but spending some time in the editor is pretty important. So I definitely don't feel bad about that. If I click on my sites up here, it's going to take me back to the back end of the website. Again, if you have a different, if you're not using WordPress.com, if you're using a different version of WordPress or WordPress hosted elsewhere, you might have different options up here, but it should be pretty easy to get to the back end. Look for a dashboard up here. It's my primary advice for that. Okay, so let's go over where it says posts. Again, if I click all posts, then it's going to show me the list of posts. There's categories and tags, which we'll talk about in a sec. And there's add new, which is what I'm going to do now. So I'll click add new. And we'll call this one new post. Okay, and then down here, I'll click in the editor and it says type / to choose a block. I'm not going to do that. I'm just going to put some text in here. And instead of typing out a bunch of text, because I want a fair bit of text in here to play around with, I'm actually going to go over and I'm going to go to the example files that I'm using. And if you downloaded the example files, you can also use. If you're using your own files, this is when this is the thing I mentioned about like a writing sample or having some text that you want on your website ready to go. So I'm going to go into, on my computer, and I'm going to open in the example site assets, I'm going to open example text.txt, and that's going to give me Notepad. Let me go ahead and show that on the screen. Okay, there we go. So in Notepad, I've opened this up, and this is just the first chapter of War of the Worlds by H.G. Wells. It's public domain text, so we're going to use this. What I'm going to do is just go edit, select all, and then I can right click and click copy. By the way, you could do the same thing with the keyboard. Control A is select all, Control C is copy. And if you're on a Mac, it's Command A and Command C. Back over here in WordPress, I'm going to click where it says type / to choose a block, and I'm just going to paste it in. Again, I could right click and click paste, or I can use Control V, Command V on a Mac, that's V as in Victor, to paste it in. Now, unfortunately, because it's all one string of plain text, WordPress has not figured out that this is separate paragraphs. So I will, if I were doing this for real, I would need to go in, find the end of each paragraph and press enter to go ahead and then delete, to go ahead and change these so that they're in separate paragraph blocks rather than just one. That's kind of a pain, but still, it's easier than typing all that out or copying and pasting it one paragraph at a time into WordPress. So I don't feel too bad about that. Okay, so anyway, and now I've got a few paragraph blocks here. In between my blocks, I can come over here if I want to leave this, or if I want to get in between one of these paragraph blocks and add something additional, I can move my mouse in there and I can click the plus sign. Of course, this works with any blocks. You can move your mouse over and click on the plus sign there. And when I click browse all, there's a bunch of stuff here. Excuse me. The main thing I want to point out is something very specific that's only for your blog posts. And that is this more block right here, M-O-R-E. You could also just search more up at the top. When I click on that, then it's going to give me this dotted line and the words read more in the middle. And there aren't a whole lot of settings to deal with this block. What it's going to do is it's going to give me my, when I actually publish the post, as we're browsing, or as my users are browsing through my blog posts, basically if I don't insert this, what's going to happen is they are going to see each blog post in its entirety as they're scrolling through my blog. So they'll see all of this post, in other words, all of the first chapter of War of the Worlds by H.G. Wells. And then if they scroll through that whole thing, they'll see all of the next post and all of the next post and so on. Inserting the more block, though, allows it to sort of cut it off right here. And what it will do is, and what that will do is when you go back to the, when you go to the list of blog posts, rather than seeing each blog post in its entirety, the posts that have this more tag or this more block in them will only show that, or whatever text and images and whatever else is above the more block, and everything that's underneath the more block will be hidden, but there will be a link that says read more. You click on that and it'll take the person to the actual web page that has the full post on it. And that's a nice thing for your visitors. You don't want your visitors, if your visitors are looking for some specific post on your blog or some specific type of content, you don't want them to have to scroll through, a whole, hundreds or thousands of word treatise in order to get to the content that they're looking for. So that's the more block, and that's really useful. One last thing we'll tackle about the editor, and then we'll kind of wrap it up. Well, a couple of things. Up here at the top, you do have an undo button here, so you can use the undo. And if you've undone too much, there's a redo button here as well. So there's some other stuff up there that's not as important. When I hit this ... up here for next to any of these toolbars for a block, I have a bunch of additional options. They're kind of meta options for these blocks. If I click copy here, then I can actually kind of paste the block somewhere else, and that's pretty cool. I can hit duplicate, and that will create a create a duplicate version of this block that I can then place somewhere else on my page or my post if I need to. Insert before and insert after, those will insert those. That's the same as kind of clicking the little plus sign here to add a block before or after the block that you're working in. Move to is going to allow you to basically scroll down and find the exact place you want and just actually, that's weird. That doesn't behave quite like I was thinking. Interesting. So I don't know. That does some kind of movement. Edit as HTML. You can change the HTML code inside of this block. Add to reusable blocks. If there's a bit of content that you use over and over again in various places on your site, you can add it to the reusable blocks, and then you can reuse it anytime you want just by inserting a block and then searching for whatever you decide to name it. You can also group blocks together so you can move them all as one thing. And of course, you have remove block. So if you have a block that you no longer want, then you can delete it. All right. So over here on the side, I'm going to click the post tab here really quick, and we'll talk about the overall post settings, and then we'll wrap it up. All of these settings are the same: your visibility, your publish date, your pending review. You do have stick to the top of the blog, though. What that's going to do is make this post stay at the top of the blog even when other posts are created after it. So if you have a post with the rules for the comments section or things like that, then you'll definitely want to make sure. You may want to post that somewhere where your audience is really likely to see it, and that's a good way to do that. Let's see, we've got our featured image, we've got our excerpt, allow comments, and then so allowing comments, a little more like is a little more reasonable on a blog post rather than a static page. And then you have your pingbacks and trackbacks. So basically, a pingback is sort of the pingbacks and trackbacks both are basically essentially a way to sort of to tell your audience, like, or to tell other people that you've linked to them and things like that. So for example, if you link to somebody else's blog, then they can actually see, like, if they get a bunch of traffic from your site, they can actually see, oh, so-and-so, or this particular website, they won't necessarily have any information about you, but this particular website this particular website sent me a bunch of traffic, and maybe they'll shout you out in a future post or things like that. So depending on who you're linking to and what the tenor of your post is and so forth, this may be a good thing to turn on, or it may be to try and get more attention to your site, or it may be a good thing to turn off to avoid the wrath of someone you might be that you might not be covering in a favorable way. Lastly, there are two ways to organize your blog posts: categories and tags. So categories, the way they work is they're kind of a hierarchy. So there's uncategorized. You could just post a blog post without putting it in any particular category. You can also add new categories. So I'll add a new category called fiction, and I'll click add new category. Okay, great. And then it's already been added to the fiction category, so that's checked for me. Let's add another new category, and I'll call it sci-fi. And then under the parent category, I'm going to click on fiction, because all sci-fi is fiction, not all fiction is sci-fi. So when I add the new category now, you'll notice it's indented underneath that. So this is in both the sci-fi category and its parent category, fiction. And there are various ways that you can allow your audience to navigate through these categories. I'll show you at least one tomorrow, but basically this is a way to allow your audience to find content that's related, so that you don't have to worry about your or so that they can keep reading your site and dig into a topic that they're really interested in. Tags are a similar thing, but they're a little less rigid, and they can be used in a lot of different ways. So I could have a sci-fi tag or a fiction tag, but I could also tag it H.G. Wells. By default, or by tradition, and honestly, just for practical reasons, you usually don't want to include spaces in your tags, and you usually want to keep them all lowercase, because they might be used in web addresses, and it's going to make things a lot easier on people. If they want to browse all the posts in a particular with a particular tag, it's going to make it easier to make that happen. So lowercase, no spaces, and use a dash instead of spaces if you want to, because that's compatible with that's how a URL works. So I typed that in. I put a comma. It says separate with commas or the enter key. So I put a comma, and it's going to make that into a tag. So we'll say aliens, Victorian, copy and paste, and so on. If I had, for example, if sometimes I posted, if sometimes I put up posts with my photography work on them or something, then I might have a photos tag, and then someone could browse through all the posts with the photos tag and see my photography or things like that. So just think about different types of posts that you commonly post, or that you might commonly create in the future, And you can use tags to organize your stuff really in a really handy way. Now, again, normally I would add a featured image and I would put in an excerpt. But since we're running low on time, I'm not going to do that. And I'm going to go ahead and hit publish. Publish one more time. And I'll click, I could go here, view post, copy link. That's interesting. You could turn it into audio. Okay. Okay, view post. And this is what the post looks like. Great. Okay, so, and by the way, you can see like there's the author's username here, the tag. So I could quickly click on one of these and go to, and see a list of all the posts that have that tag. And here are the categories as well, fiction and sci-fi. And you can also see, you can see like a bio of the author and so on and so forth. Okay, so let's talk about the homework for tomorrow. It's not going to be again. It's not going to be anything super intense. We're going to keep it pretty light and easy. But obviously, like I said last week or yesterday, using your own content rather than using placeholder content is basically gonna be better in terms of not wasting time and things like that. So here are the things that you probably will want to do. Number one, you'll need some well, I guess it's two of kind of similar things. So what you'll want is basically two different forms of like identity images for your website. Those are your logo and your icon. So the logo is going to be if you're making your website for a company, or if you already have a logo, this is going to be super duper easy, right? So just it's your logo. The only thing I would specify about it is you want a version of your logo that has a transparent background. So it's going to be a file whose name ends in .png, like ping but without the I. So a file where the name ends in .png with a transparent background. If you've got, if you are working with someone who created the logo, things like that, then you may want to ask them for a version like that, because they'll be able to give it to you pretty easily. They'll know exactly what you're talking about. Otherwise, if you don't use a transparent background, then anything, unless your logo is square or is a rectangle, then what's going to happen is, with no like see-through elements, then what's going to happen is your logo is going to have an ugly box around it, and it won't fit in with the rest of your site or look very smooth or professional. The icon is a similar type of thing, and it might even be the same depending on how simple your logo is. But what I'm talking about is these types of icons up here. If you look at, say, the Pocket icon here, or this SharePoint one, or the Gmail one, they're not always the same as the logo for whatever it is that, for the company or for the product or whatever. Sometimes they're different. If you, for instance, the library's website, our icon is this right here. So it's just a little orange L inside of a box. And so that's because our logo, well, we have a bunch of different kinds of logos, but our logo is something like this. So it's going to have a box that says CALS and Central Arkansas Library System somewhere in there, something like this. And that's too big and complicated to read at such a small size. And so what we have is, so we have a separate icon that we use for this. And you may need to do that as well. Basically, you want something that's circular or square. And again, you want something with a transparent background if you can get it. All right. And that is, and it doesn't have to be a very large image at all. That's pretty much it. What questions do y'all have for me before we wrap it up for today? All right. Oh, when will this be on YouTube? Right now. It's on YouTube right now, this very moment. We are still live on YouTube. And so yeah. Yeah, I with pretty much all of these classes, I do live stream them at least to YouTube and Facebook, and sometimes to the new Cal's Twitch channel as well. So so yeah, you can almost always find this on YouTube unless something goes disastrously wrong, in which case I will remove it from YouTube at the end. But this class has gone fine, so so yeah, it'll be there. An easy way to get there is to go to cals.link/YouTube. Okay, another question. What size should the logo and icon be? So the icon, I think the icon should be at least 64 pixels wide and tall. And like I said, it should be a square image or something, basically something that'll fit in a space like this. So if it's oblong, then it's not going to work. So at least 64 by 64 pixels and larger if you have it, up to, I believe, 500 by 500 is like the biggest that they typically want. The logo can be bigger. It should be, like I said, a transparent PNG file. I mean, pretty high resolution is going to be the best option for you, but I guess once you get to about, I'd say once you get to about 1,000 pixels in any direction, that's probably overboard. So, yeah, if it's like medium size like that, that's pretty good. Cool. Any other questions? Thanks for asking those questions during class, by the way. I really appreciate that. That helps me make sure that I'm covering the information that you need, and just helps everyone stay engaged. So definitely appreciate that. All right. Well, I don't see any other questions. So thank you so much for joining me again today. Sorry we ran a little long, but hopefully it was is valuable. And I will catch you tomorrow, same time, same place. In the meantime, have a great one. Bye.